Right. So moving on from sociality, let's discuss in brief what some evolutionary psychologists have called the kind of rather tongue-in-cheek, really, the holy trinity of exaptations. These are the three exaptations that many evolutionary psychologists and those who do philosophy and ethics, who a philosophy and ethics informed by evolutionary theory, attribute as being the key components towards what separates out mankind, humankind, as a moral species from all other social species. These three acceptations are adaptations that we see in other animals, right? But not all three together. And if they are together, then the adaptations, or at least one of these acceptations, has not evolved or been co-opted beyond its initial use as it has done in humans, right? Or as has been the case with humankind. So the three acceptations are reason, language, and empathy. Reason initially was a tool for second order reflective thought, right? The ability to take a step back and examine a situation functionally. And this allows a species to learn from and predict with greater regularity future events based on prior events. Right? It's not just so rather than just be thrown into a situation and judge it based off of precedent, prior experience, we're able to predict events before they happen. Now we see this ability for reason in a number of species, in a very small degree within dogs. We see it within the greater ape species, such as orangutans and chimpanzees. And we also see it in elephants, too. All right. Language initially was a symbolic system intended to communicate important or vital information to other members of the group. Right? So, in this way, our language, at least initially, was no different than any other sort of form of communication that we see in other animals. What allows us for the complexity of language that we possess is the way that our vocal folds adapted to our upright posture, with our upright posture and everything. So initially it was just an adaptation based on changes in vocal structure, but because of the flexibility of sounds that it allowed us to make, right, and the mobility of our tongue and things like that, we became capable of coding meaning beyond the direct and strictly vital. So we started coming up with abstract concepts that could be encoded in language that couldn't be encoded in the proto-language of our evolutionary ancestors, that can't be fully encoded in, how apes or elements or dolphins communicate. Although all three of these species can communicate a wide swath of information more than other social species. Right? So it's because we could create unique sounds for all these different things that we could come up with concepts like chair, right, or desk, or Rurouni Kenshin, or Sigmund Freud, right? Quick draw, right? Things like that. And you can understand what they mean with context as a result of this. And it allowed us not only to be able to create these concepts, but to make them communicable to others, right? And this is where sociality comes in. Language doesn't really have much strength outside of a social species. An asocial species has no need for language because the members don't interact enough for it to develop. Right, the purposeful interactions can take place without encoding meaning beyond basic grunts and whatnot. Eusocial species have proto-languages, or what some scientists call proto-languages, such as like the dancing communication for that bumblebees do to indicate, distance and direction of pollinated flowers. The third exaptation is empathy. And empathy, quite simply, is the ability to feel for and with others in an affective or like an emotional sense, right? To mirror the emotional responses and feel the emotions that other people are feeling. Now, this started out as sympathy, and with reason, it was able to develop into something more. This is why you see only in animals that have at least a very basic capacity for reason, as we've defined it, do you see the capacity for empathy as well. You might see sympathy in the most basic sense, and outside of in species that don't have reason, but you don't see empathy without reason as well. Elephants have a whole culture of grief, burial traditions, things like that, or at least African elephants do. You know, so it's important that you have the distinction between empathy and sympathy in mind. Sympathy is just an acknowledgement, more or less, of the fact that a situation is unfavorable, or it's an outside assessment, more or less, of someone else's situation, right? But there's no particular attachment to the plight of the other. Right? Give you an example, common expression, that sucks. Right? That sucks is just an acknowledgement that sucks. It's not saying that, oh, I really feel badly for you. It's just saying, that sucks. Oh, well. Right? Meanwhile, an empathetic response would be, I feel for you, man. Right? It expresses that, you understand and feel at least some marginal, at least marginally, something, a marginally similar, what you feel at least marginally a similar emotional response to what regarding the other person's plight.